Tom, over here in this corner, I have a couple of photos that I put up here expressly for people who want to be shocked. There are people who've already heard a great deal about the walls in this bathroom, and they imagine all sorts of things. If you notice, if you look around, there's nothing really very obscene on the walls. They're largely curiosities. But I put these expressly for those people, what you call them, who are looking always for dirty stuff, do you know? Here's a wonderful Zen story. It's about a monk called Roshi Bobo, which in English means master of fuck. Now, the title shouldn't throw anyone and may not mean exactly what people think. But there's one thing you can say about the master of fuck, that this fuck is an extraordinary one like none that ever was before. And the whole story concerns a young man, 15 years of age, whose parents sent him to a Zen monastery to become a monk and, of course, to receive enlightenment. He was a fairly bright young man, good-looking, obedient, and as far as anyone could see, good material. But after a few years, nothing seemed to happen. He didn't seem to be getting anywhere. 5 years passed, nothing. 10, and even his masters began to despair of him. Finally, after 15 years, he decided that he didn't have it in him. He didn't have what it takes, and he would go out and enjoy earthly life, you know, be a man of the world if he couldn't be a monk. So he slipped out one night with his bag and baggage, and he wandered into the red light district. And there he encountered a girl, seemed to him like a geisha, and he went to bed with her immediately. Well, it was his first experience with a woman. And instead of being awkward, though, and embarrassed and shy and so on, he seemed to be very adept. His senses were highly attuned from his Zen training. He was aware of her body, the touch, the smell, and everything. Even when the clothes dropped to the floor, created a sensation in him. So, in the midst of this marvelous experience, he suddenly has what he couldn't get in the monastery, the experience of Satori. He saw things as they are and were and always will be, once and forever, clearly, you know, which is really what enlightenment is all about, don't you know? The important thing was that he had allowed himself to go to the very end of doubt and despair. Had he not, you see, this would never have happened. But he went to the very end of the tunnel and saw the light. And this is, of course, something that does not happen to people in psychoanalysis. They may be adapted to our corrupt world when they're finished, but they never reach Satori, do you see? And they never see things as they really are, in my opinion. And of course, there's another aspect to it, and a very wonderful one. It is like William Blake's idea of reaching heaven through hell. It doesn't matter what road you take to reach paradise. And beside that even, one might say that paradise is not even just around the corner, but right under your nose, if you happen to be lucky and aware enough, you know. And I think that's the great burden of it, that one should, how shall I say, accept his doubts completely, as the Buddha once advised, you know. Accept despair and anguish and frustration and see it through. Don't go to a doctor. Don't go to an analyst, above all. up there is one of my favorite men, you know, here. Hermann Hesse. When I look at him here, it reminds me of Goldmund or Narcissus, which is almost the two sides of himself. You know, the monkish one and the artist. And as you remember in that book, he makes the monk confess to the artist that he is the better one, that his was a greater life, a more meaningful life. You know, which is very interesting because the artist led a sort of a wild, profligate life of adventure, you know, women and everything. And the monk is austere and righteous and so on. And Hess makes the monk say to him, you know, yours was after all the better one. And even meaning the more spiritual one too. I don't know if you have noticed that most writers don't look so hard. Writers are alone too much with their thoughts, you know, and they are bent over, they're weazened, and they're thin-blooded, and they're living in an abstract realm all the time of ideas, whereas the painter is plastic, you know, and the musician, of course, is living, well, this is not true, but you would think he's living an angelic life. He's up there with the birds. Right under that is a very strange thing. This is chiseled into a stone, and this is done by Jung, the great psychoanalyst. In a few words, what this represents is the whole of his philosophy, Jung's philosophy, in these symbols. It's very, very strange and very interesting, but I can't make any of it out, you know, except like astrological symbols. But what the rest is, it could be Hebrew or Egyptian. There's another very strange, very interesting one, the very opposite maybe of Jung. This comes from some very ancient Chinese book of poetry, and it's supposed to be absolutely inscrutable. I've had the Chinese in here looking at it, and they've given me all sorts of interpretations. You see, some say that it's probably a Taoist saying, you know. Others say no, that it has to do with legends months before the Tao, you know, and Lao Tse, what's his name? I was going to say Mao Zedong. Then, of course, other people have said, why, shit, it's nothing but a commercial advertisement, you know, maybe for coffee or tea or rice or something like that. But every Chinese who's been in here has given me a different interpretation of this thing. It's weird. Before committing suicide, General Nogi's wife wrote a letter to her niece who was about to get married. And it was as if she were giving her a prescription for a happy marriage. And having read that thing, I myself believe that it's the most wonderful prescription. Well, it went into many details, largely how the wife should behave toward the husband at all times. And it even went into details about the bed, about intercourse. For instance, how she should not act too passionately and unrestrainedly, abandonedly, because then it would be acting like a whore. Although between you and me, you know damn well whores don't go that way. And then she said, and when you are through, of course, you get the warm towel for your husband and you wipe him carefully, gently. And as for yourself, you know, they use a sort of a paper towel, the Japanese. She said, now when you wipe yourself, be very careful that it doesn't crackle so as to disturb your husband's equanimity, you know. Very wonderful touch. In what country would they ever think of such a thing, huh?